Hello, hello, everyone. Happy Sunday and happy Mother's Day. It's been a minute since we did one of these. So yeah, it should be a very exciting time. Today, I'm joined by Thomas Sheedy, president for Atheists for Liberty. His bio on Atheist Alliance International says, Thomas Sheedy. Actually, I'll bring up the window. Let's do that. Let's be creative. Do 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 do. Nope, not that one. Where is it? See, I should have got the tabs ready beforehand. I was gonna know that I wanted it. Such is life, such is life. Okay, let's see here. Why is it not showing me the tab I want? That's just disrespectful. Okay, well, I'll find it in a moment, I suppose. Okay, Thomas Sheedy is an entrepreneur from Long Island, an undergraduate in the Rockefeller College of Public Affairs at the University at Albany, where he serves as the Public Relations Chair for the University at Albany College Republicans. He's appeared on multiple podcasts, blogs, and YouTube video interviews, and has participated extensively in student atheist activism. He was an assistant state director for American Atheists, a long list of other organizations, and was a Freedom from Religion Foundation Student of the Year. He also holds memberships with a bunch of organizations, including the Ripon Society. I hadn't heard of that one before, but in short, it's a Rooseveltian Republican group named for the town where the GOP was founded, and known for being the first Republican group to back the Civil Rights Amendment. I, too, find much of merit in Roosevelt's version of republicanism, such as conserving the environment, holding corporations accountable to the public good, and Teddy's general philosophy that the main function of government should be the protection of citizens, their rights, and their well-being. Thomas, I only met you a couple of days ago and invited you on because I think what you said about building a united community based on secular values is important. As I said when we met on Kentucky Atheist Channel, I am a trans person and I have a trans child, and all too often religion gets in the way of reasonable discourse on these and many other topics. As long as a person agrees all humans are people first and foremost, and therefore deserve the same basic rights and respect, I think we can work towards other values that we share, such as the normalization of atheism. So let's get started. First thing is, how did you come to be an atheist?
So, firstly, I want to say, Ember, thank you so much for having me on the show. That bio, I got to contact AAI. The one they have on their site is actually kind of old. I finished up college actually uh, nearly 3 years ago. So a few things have changed. The bio is definitely needs to be a little more updated. But I am very glad to be on here. I loved meeting you on the Kentucky Atheist live stream. And again, very thrilled to be here. So I became an atheist a little over 10 years ago, 11 years ago at this point, because I was raised in a suburban Roman Catholic family on Long Island. And I was already getting very, very skeptical of the Catholic Church and its stance on inflicting its religious values into the sphere of public policy. I was always a supporter, for instance, of gay rights and LGBT activism when I was younger. And I always kind of had this church state mentality in my head because while my mother was a part of the moral majority when she was around my age, I was raised in a public school environment where I was already understanding that what happened in church happens in church and what happens in school happens in school. And so when gay marriage was a very big issue in the early 2010s, I found it to be interesting that a feudalistic church based on mystical tales is able to try to dictate its views in a secular republic. So lots of skepticism as a Catholic growing up and becoming a teenager. And then I watched a clip of Bill Maher studying for my Regents exams, where one of his old skits he said that you can drill out Catholicism just like you can drill poison out of your body. And I remember at that exact moment,
Hmm.
this is around the spring of 2013, I became an atheist.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've known a number of Catholics over the years, and a lot of them, there's always a moment where they're like, "Why am I doing all of this?" And suddenly it dawns on them, it doesn't have to be that way. Whether it's they know Protestants who see there's a distinction, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, or they meet an atheist, or they meet a member of another religion and go, "Wait a minute, what I believe isn't automatically true." So how do I know any of it is true? Various things like that. Um, yeah, it's fascinating the way we all come to deconversion. But do you think there's value in religion?
I think there's value in seeing the history of religion and how humans can organize. So I overall think that religion is outdated. It is an ancient relic at this point that we should rationally move on from. I very much support religious freedom and freedom of speech. Everyone has the right to believe in whatever they want to, even if it's nonsensical. But I think we can be nice in the sphere of understanding that religion was what we thought. Religion is a collection of stories based on what we thought at the time was most plausible for the creation of the universe and how society should function. We know better now, and I think we should be honest about that as much as we can.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, that's one of the big things that I push for in my own atheist advocacy is science literacy. Like, you can absolutely be a believer and believe in science. There's ways to reconcile that. But if you deny science because of a Bronze Age book of myths, then you're not doing yourself or society any favors. How did you get into advocacy?
So right after I became an atheist, I wanted to kind of figure out how I was going to go about my teenage years. And very soon after, I started to learn about an organized movement of atheists that were trying to be accepted as equally as moral and ethical in our society. I loved the church state activism that a lot of the atheist organizations at the time were doing. I was obsessed with the Four Horsemen, as well as plenty of other great atheist thinkers and activists, men and women alike, who were doing a lot of great things in this country, and I wanted to contribute to that as much as possible. I then got into high school atheist activism, nearly sued my school district in order to get an atheist club started. That's how I got my FFRF and CFI background originally started with them. And I just continued to kind of go down that path throughout the years. So everything I do, a lot of the things I do, my political activism, a lot of it is directly tied and directly links to the end goal that I've wanted to really see envisioned in the country since 2013, which is, as President Kennedy said, a um, eh, what was it? What was the quote? A separation of church and state that's absolute. And I think we need to continue to do that by any and all means necessary, which is, I think, what united us in that chat just a few days ago.
It's possible because it's definitely a very, very important issue. To There's still debate to this day what the founders had in mind with the separation of church and state, but it's pretty clear that even if they were working under the assumption that everyone would be a believer of some form, that they understood they needed to be able to set their own preconceptions aside and create secular rules that were fair for all.
Yeah.
But, we live in a world full of endless debate. But speaking
And it's
of
only going to
Kentucky
continue.
Atheist, yeah. Speaking of Kentucky Atheist stream, in that stream, you've been doing AFL for a while, AFL. I got it right. Okay, trust me, I know what I'm doing. It's fine. You mentioned you took a break. Was that from YouTube or advocacy in general, and why?
I believe the break I was referring to in that stream was the break I took between leading the local atheist group. So I was president of Long Island Atheists when I was 18 years old after graduating from high school for around 2 years. And then I transferred from community college to university. So that's where I went up from Long Island, New York to the state capital around three to 3.5 hours away. And while I was there, I started to kind of see in politics there, and in a lot of the cultural war dialogues, a lot of religious framing, a lot of religious references with dogmatic types that I never thought would become my own adversaries, my problematic people that would get in the way of secular rationality. And I started to kind of realize that there were blind spots that atheist activism had as a result of the division that took place in the atheist community, both online and in person. And so I had this kind of during this break, I developed this kind of deep frustration at the movement. How could we
Hmm.
sacrifice such a little finite resources over nonsensical issues or issues that you might think are of value, but issues that the atheist movement shouldn't focus on because we're trying to build a movement here and a coalition here. Um, Only to see the counterculture that was new atheism at least die out in comparison to how things were maybe 10 years ago in 2014 in comparison to now. And I had a bit of resentment. I had a bit of resentment, but at the same time, I had enough experience and knowledge of the movement to know where we needed to go. And so I got together with a few other veterans of the atheist community, the atheist movement from back in the day, from uh, staffers and board members of the Secular Coalition for America, student activists from my Secular Student Alliance days, people I knew from American Atheists, came together and we created an organization called Atheists for Liberty, which is trying to continue the solid, rational, and fiery atheist activism that got atheism normalized more in this country in the first place. I
I
rant a lot
see.
sometimes, by the
It's
way.
it's all good. I'm known for rants as well. I go on tangents. That's all fine. But in that description there, you said something that I find curious. I can't remember quite how you phrased it, but it was along the lines of spending a lot of effort on things that either may be pointless or may be important to some people, but shouldn't take away from the main thrust of atheism. What do you mean by that?
Mostly the divide over social justice, and mostly, I would say, most quasi left-leaning political issues. So, for those of you who are watching, who have been in the community for some time, you might know of this concept called Atheism Plus, which premiered around 11 years ago at the American Atheist National Convention. You had a guy named Richard Carrier at the time who was on stage talking about this idea that we need to embrace more than just atheism, atheism plus social justice. And then, you could even go into questioning, okay, what do you mean by social justice? Because that's a term that especially amongst people on the left, is very subjective. So some people thought of it as just, oh, let's have more black people at our conferences. Let's have more gay people and LGBT people at our conferences. Let's reach into trying to go into communities where religion is more prevalent and try to show those communities that you can be an atheism and a good person, be an atheist and be a good person. Like in the black community, for instance, you have such a massive rate of Christianity and religiosity. That's why I originally liked the concept of the organization Black Nonbelievers. But then we started to cancel each other because we started to get into equity fights. Well, you don't have enough of this person, these types of people, or those types of people at conferences. People also started to get accused at events and conferences of things that they didn't do. A lot of accusations of harassment and assault. And of course, I am no fan of harassment and assault of any kind. I think professionalism needs to be normalized at every kind of event, especially counterculture type events where you're fighting things that used to be seen as normal in society. But we jumped the gun, and we jumped the gun too quick. And so we kind of forgot our once successful notion of being bipartisan, being unified, and focusing on the things that made an atheist movement. And instead, we embraced our own political divides, which I think led to the collapse of new atheism as a counterculture, which I think is an absolute shame. Whether or not you stand on the left of a certain social issue or the right of a social issue, like Planned Parenthood has millions, probably even billions in the bank. I wouldn't be surprised. And then you look at like the NRA, a right-wing organization, right? You talk about guns or the Second Amendment that has millions, if not billions, in the bank. Have those fights at the Planned Parenthood and the NRA conferences. We in the atheist community from 2013 through 16, 17 standards, each organization only had a few $1 million, maybe the most, and that in each of their bank accounts, and those were the successful organizations. So we had this amazing uptick of bipartisan intellectualism, activism, and an ability to try to reach into more communities to diversify ourselves. But we embraced our divisions more than our unifiers, which I think ultimately led to the issues that we see today in the movement.
To an extent, I think, because I guess people they see atheism as a goal. I guess, like, what is the atheism for? What are we trying to get away from religion for? Right?
Right.
For a lot of people, they leave religion because of purity culture, which is highly oppressive to women. And so when they join the atheist movement, they expect some emphasis on equality and feminism and reasonable
Mm,
protections and so on and so forth. Similar thing with LGBT. People are told they're evil, they're wicked, they're sinners, and so they come to the atheist side and they want to see that they're treated like regular everyday people. Um, I can see certain issues like an NRA kind of thing being separate, like that can be a completely apart debate. But
mm,
Planned Parenthood, it's weirdly, I think the second question down after this, I was going to ask about in Friday's stream. You said that when certain potentially divisive topics come up, abortion rights in that particular case, you try to keep
mm.
the focus on normalizing atheism. So
Yes.
it's interesting that you mentioned Planned Parenthood when on Friday you went out of your way to say, let's keep abortion off the table because that it's not this issue that we're talking about. So I guess like why bring up Planned Parenthood now, or why is it that you try to avoid abortion specifically? I guess.
Yeah, so that's actually a very, very good question. And a lot of atheists might actually, especially people from the YouTube atheist sphere, might rightfully be asking, but like Thomas, we've been talking about abortion rights in conjunction with atheism and secularism for actually a few decades now. Why all of a sudden is this an issue? Well, it's because when you look at the topic of abortion, as I've started to also see atheism normalized in other areas of politics, I've started to kind of understand, and I'm not in the pro life movement, by the way, but I've started to at least understand the idea that you could actually be pro life. And I've met atheists that have a pro life position from a purely non-religious, non-fairy tale, non-mysticism perspective, claiming that from a biological angle, because this fetus is a heartbeat or it's an incoming life, we in the West should not engage in a practice that terminates said life. From a very biological, intellectual, language point of view, not this idea of, well, Jesus says so, and therefore we got to inflict our view onto all of you. I'm not saying that that is the view that atheists should go with. We have plenty of pro-choice atheists and atheists for liberty as well. Um, but especially since we're trying to rebuild a basically quasi dead movement and turn it into something robust that'll catch people's ears and attention, that'll galvanize the country back into motion when it comes to fighting for church state separation. I think that issue would only divide us more than help us. And I'm not saying, too, by the way, that if you were to go to an atheist conference and there's somebody, you got Bob sitting on the, in his seat, several tables away from you, and he has a view that you find to be absolutely grotesque when it comes to, say, abortion or anything like that. No one has to like Bob. You don't have to like Bob. You don't have to agree with Bob. But Bob organized his county atheist society or humanist society to come here to do some atheist activism here. And you got your people, at that convention from your local community to all unite over these particular issues here. I'm not asking for everybody to be friends and to have a kumbaya of we're all going to love each other and our views. No, we're in a movement here where we have to fight for our rights. We have to fight to keep our republic the way it is. We have to fight to make sure that our separation between church and state is absolute. And so we have to act as professional as we can and to make sure that we fight for the issues at least that we agree on. We can always have disagreements. And I think it's actually healthy that we do have disagreements. It'd be very weird if we were like we would be in church, we'd all be like, we are in agreement on every issue. And I'm not asking for that. But I think we jumped the gun a little too early. Abortion might is just one example, but like there's a bunch of different other examples I could give where we ended up going from massive atheist conferences that would have thousands of people in attendance to, you go to your local Skepticon or you go to, AACon and you'll find maybe 400 or 500 people max, and that's during a good year. And that's with atheism rising, rising, and rising from the Pew Research stands. So it has nothing to do with atheism. It has to do with us as a community attacking each other rather than learning the successful lessons of our predecessors from 10 to 15 years ago.
Well, I dare say COVID may have something to do with the smaller conferences today, other things like that. But I can understand trying to not get sidetracked when you have a primary goal. You want to keep a fractious community united behind that goal. But this is where things get a little bit more spicy. Some of the other things you've said have given me concerns that you may have misrepresented yourself. and I want to give you the opportunity to explain. So, for example, in several interviews and in social media posts, you've spoken about the dangers of wokeism. Um, that term gets used in a lot of different ways. So, when you refer to wokeness, what do you mean?
So I've ended up putting this link in the live chat, I think, of the Kentucky Atheists chat. New discourse is a really good definition of wokeism that's very, very academic. But I actually am starting to actually have a problem with the word wokeism. I still use it because it's in my vernacular, it's in my vocabulary. But I might actually start going back to using the words social justice and social justice warrior because, and this is the problem with the word woke, you have some people using the word woke to mean actual social justice gone too wild, dividing us over nothing, canceling people for having simple differences of opinions from our college campuses to places online, to businesses, etc. But then you have your baby boomer uncle watching Fox News calling a liberal position on healthcare woke, right? The term has now kind of become a boy who cried wolf kind of term. And that's kind of my issue with the term woke. I see the right now taking that word and molding it into something that it really isn't. And I think that has also only led to us making more enemies as well. Sometimes not even due to the actions of people more on the woke side, but people on the so-called anti-woke side. And so this is something I've been trying to now change. That's why during even this discussion, I've tried to use social justice, social justice, social justice, because people, at least in the internet counterculture community, kind of know a little bit more of what I'm talking about. Whereas with woke, it's just been butchered by mainstream politics time and time again.
I do agree that it's definitely become a hot button issue, uh, partly because it so frequently gets used as a far right dog whistle. But we'll get into that later. That
Sure.
doesn't seem like maintaining political neutrality to keep atheism front and center, though. So why do you speak on it so frequently?
Well, because we and a lot of the people within Atheists for Liberty, we've seen what we now call wokeism as an issue that has harmed and caused the collapse of the movement. I would view that as the primary force. We ended up, for example, when it comes to the topic of Islam, we ended up canceling a lot of people at atheist conferences, atheist events, not associating with other atheists because they ended up talking about the ferocity and ferociousness of the Islamic religion at the same level of our criticism of Christianity, right? This was the whole Bill Maher Ben Affleck debate that ended up. I remember the atheist community just blowing up. I was 16 years old and I watched this debate live, and I saw all these different local, state, and national atheist leaders, like the 5,000 people from the atheist community we all have as Facebook friends, losing their shit and getting super duper upset because we as atheists have an issue with a religion. Oh, but it happens to be the religion of a group of people in the United States that happen to be a minority. So therefore, we're somehow being bigots towards Reform Muslims in the United States. No, not. And that automatic gut defense of Islam that they don't have, that some of these so-called, maybe you could say, woke people or social justice oriented people, they didn't have that same amount of defense, automatic defense for Christianity. And to be fair, to be transparent, I am having an issue. You could actually, if you've been taking a look at my X feed, I have been having a massive issue with these so-called cultural Christians, with these people on the right who have now the same issue that I was criticizing the woke people for, this automatic defense of Christianity. Because, well, Christianity is better than wokeism, so therefore we got to prop up Christianity as much as possible. It's something that I call BS on, regardless of where it orients itself politically. So I don't like wokeism because it is a defense of religious dogma in the name of diversity, and it has killed and hindered our community because of that.
I I don't think that's true. You've mentioned that wokeism, in your view, is social justice concepts, and based on that understanding, it seems that it's kind of the opposite of religious oppression because it's people saying, "Hey, all these social conventions that have historically kept minorities down and people of color down and other marginalized groups down because holy books said a thing." Well, now we're trying to rectify that situation. So I don't see how being in favor of social justice doesn't automatically go hand in hand with atheism. Like equality for all is kind of a secular value as well as a conservative value.
I would say so. But I think we simply then disagree on what it means to be woke, right? Though I've seen this debate happen a lot of times in the atheist community, where you have some people that say, "Oh, well, being woke just means having an awareness of social injustices and issues in our society that have plagued certain communities," right? But when I mean social justice, and when we're talking about the internet slang of social justice, or what has become wokeness in that academic and even slang sense, it is this push gone to such an extreme length that lumps things that are not bigotry into bigotry, which led to that division.
So you're saying it's not necessarily social justice in general, but the idealized form of social justice. You think it goes too
Sure.
far?
I think it does go too far, and to be fair as well, there are plenty of allies, within the Atheists for Liberty network who have said that they like this idea of social justice. They like the view of social justice. So, like Helen Pluckrose, who's more of a left leaning liberal, but definitely subscribes to a lot of the values that we fight for at Atheists for Liberty. She likes the idea of fighting for social justice. She likes the term, but it's just really. I guess maybe it's a disagreement as well over whether or not the term should be used or the term should be normalized.
I could definitely see how there'd be disagreement since it is poorly defined, and since in any social justice situation, everybody has a different idea of where the line should be, where we have to push the goals so that equality is achieved, and so forth. And I suppose that might be a good reason to block these out if keeping atheism front and center is the main goal. And yet
Yep.
you keep bringing it up. So yeah, I just can't help but feel like you're trying to virtue signal or something, like to a certain group of people.
Well, I, I think part of that is true. Um, we definitely are doing our best to try to market ourselves to other groups to normalize atheism there, right? So, like I was saying on the last stream, when there are certain communities where atheist activism and secular activism is not relevant, we're trying to go there. And then also, too, to be fair, that is also my personal X account. So there are other things that I engage in politically, culturally, as well. While I try to link it as much as I can to my atheist activism too, I also do other things as well. That's why I also put in the bio of that X account, views are my own. In many cases, I do try to tie wokeism into religion. I try to orient that as much as possible. But over the years, I've also gotten into other causes too, more on a small scale in comparison to my atheist activism. But there's that as well.
All right. Well, we've got a super chat, and also I saw a bunch of gift memberships, and we've got a tight schedule today and a whole lot to talk about. So I appreciate all of you, but I can't go through the whole thing. But Dr. Tapioca Weasel asks, what non-bigotry things does AFL think are being called bigotry?
I think that is a fantastic question, and thank you so much for asking and for donating. So, for instance, this automatic defense of Islam. I'll just name that off the top. Throughout my years in the atheist community, I have seen officials, lawyers in the movement, people that are executive directors of nonprofits, people that are high level staffers of atheist think tanks go into this automatic knee jerk reaction of the defense of the religion of Islam, not when it comes to being against bigotry of Muslims, but just seeing an atheist criticize the Islamic faith. And they have this automatic gut reaction on Facebook to get into the comments to really make sure they're not being bigoted because, oh boy, we can't have that. And obviously, I'm not endorsing any bigotry of any kind against any group of Americans, but it has not happened when it comes to Christianity whatsoever. And I don't think there should be an automatic defense of Christianity. Like I said, I'm calling the right out for it too. I was having plenty of those conversations at dissident dialogues with these so-called cultural Christians, and I'm not a fan of where the right is going on some of that stuff as well. So Islam is one of them. One of the other issues that I mentioned as well when it comes to earlier in this chat is quotas, equity. So someone actually mentioned DEI in the chats. We ended up canceling other
Yeah, I
atheists
was
for
going to
not.
ask about
I
that.
thank you for the question as well. For saying, well, this person does not think that we should judge a convention based on how many black people we have, how many women we have, how many gay people we have, how many trans people we have. Therefore, that person is a bigot because that person is not making that objective their primary objective. Therefore, we should not associate with them in the overall atheist community. And we saw that happen in droves as well. And by the way, I also want to make myself very clear. I am in favor of us reaching out to as many groups as humanly possible. I think we absolutely should. I don't care, though, if 9 out of 10 people, speakers at a conference, are women and only one is a man. I don't care that 9 out of 10 speakers would be black and one happens to be white, right? I think we should, if we're trying to build a robust, bipartisan and diverse atheist community, we have to have, I think, a diversity. A physical diversity is very much a good thing because we are humans, we are animals, and we like to see that there are other people that look like us and share our experiences that also share our same goals. But what I find to be more important is diversity of thought at the end of the day. And by the way, too, again, the right has its problems. We can talk about the issues of the religious right too. I don't want people in this chat to just think that I'm some automatic defender of all things right wing. Half of my tweets really have been a massive issue with both sides of politics these days. Jenny Morgan says simplistic. Yes, it is simplistic. I'm an atheist president. I'm trying to make this simplistic as possible because I'm trying to get as many people on my side as humanly possible so we could win. So hopefully that also answers the question.
All right. Well,
Some examples.
yeah, there was a lot there. But on, you mentioned, this is from your Twitter. It doesn't necessarily reflect AFL's position. Which brings us to our next thing. On the AFL channel, there's a clip from an interview with Peter Boghossian talking about trans kids, and it's positively riddled with extremist dog whistles. For instance, you may not be aware, but Irreversible Damage is the title of a hugely controversial book by Abigail Schreier based on thoroughly discredited work by former researcher Lisa Littman. Did you know that Peter was invoking conspiracy theory garbage intended to do harm when he brought that up in this video?
Did I know that he was invoking conspiracy theory garbage? Well, I think then we can get into a discussion on if it is conspiracy theory garbage. I very much admire Peter, and I don't think of him as a person that pushes conspiracy theory garbage. What exactly did he say in the interview pertaining to him bringing up Abigail Schreier or any of the specific points that you would consider to be that?
Well, in this case, it's a relatively short video, but the general gist of it is that he believes that kids shouldn't be allowed to transition because of irreversible effects and so on and so forth. But he made a point of using the term irreversible damage in the clip. Clearly, that didn't ring any bells for you at the time. But the thing of it is whether you did know that's what he was doing or not, how do you reconcile making a video on an extremely divisive issue with that statement earlier about maintaining neutrality for the sake of keeping the community united?
So, okay, I'll answer this in a few different ways. So, when it comes to this particular clip, like pro trans but one major exception. So, what we do at Atheists for Liberty, we have our streaming series, right, where we have these long form interviews, 60 to 90 minutes long. I think with Peter, that was our May 2023 interview, where it was around an hour long. And basically, when it comes to that, we do the interview. We talk about a bunch of different topics. Sometimes Peter brings some things into the fold. So he brought up a few trans issues as a result of said discussion. And then we have our people on our comms team go ahead and make those clips. So when it comes to the exact naming of that clip, the exact logo that was used there, right, with the flag, the logo, and everything, that is something that is done independently of me. That is not to say that I'm like in massive disagreement with it. I don't have an issue with the title of that video, the graphic of that video, or anything like that. So I'm not trying to say, well, I'm not involved, but therefore it means I am not in favor. I would like to actually maybe look into this issue a little bit more. So I'm not trying to. I don't want to do that, and be dishonest there. But yeah, when it comes to having Peter on, he brought up I wanted to, the main reason I wanted Peter on, and I'm glad he talked about this in the interview, was I didn't want him to get into this automatic defense of Christianity that some others in the IDW have gone into. I think that was done fairly well. And because he has now also become a very big, you could argue, anti woke thinker, he brought up quite a few of the trans related discussions that the comms team decided to turn into a clip there.
I see. IDW, that's intellectual dark web, yes?
Intellectual dark web, yeah. He's seen as like one of the IDW type people from when that was a thing.
Yeah, that's a bit of a throwback. Yeah, I
Yeah, it's kind of
just
dead now.
yeah. I don't know, man. I just there's so many controversial things. Like as another for example on the AFL channel, it's like having David Silverman on your board, in several of your other videos. I
Oh, let's go
understand.
in. I'd love to go into that actually.
Okay, I understand that one of his accusers recanted, but others brought receipts, and whether someone believes the evidence of sexual assault or accepts David at his word, the man is a lightning rod, so why involve yourself with such a controversial and divisive figure if the unity of the movement is of paramount importance? More importantly, why send the message to women that a man's prestige matters more to you than their safety?
I totally reject the second question. I don't think that it's either or when it comes to that, and I don't even agree with the concept of that. When it comes to the first question, so Dave got falsely accused. I actually saw the receipts on his end, voice recordings, papers, numerous different testimonies from numerous different people. I was one of the people that told him that he should actually fight back against the allegations. Me, I proudly admit it, and I stand by it. The reason why we brought Dave on board, and he's the advisory board chair of this organization, is because he was one of the people that unified the movement. He came out with the Reason Rally, the 2012 event that got 30,000 atheists, left and right, together at the Washington Mall in the pouring rain to unite behind atheism and skepticism. I looked into all three of the accusations from no, Rose St. Clair, Beth Presswood, and Rebecca Vitzman. We can go into every single one of them. So when it comes to Rebecca Vitzman, there is a wonderful video on his Firebrand for Good channel where somebody who testified in court for Rebecca ended up recanting and going on the David Silverman channel, apologizing for everything that happened there. Basically, what occurred was Dave was having a good PR campaign, fighting back for his life, fighting back for his reputation after having his life completely ruined due to false accusations. He was taking the fight on going on a lot of streams and social media channels, showing that he actually is an innocent person in this whole ordeal. There were people in the movement that did not like that. They didn't like that he was successfully pushing back. And Rebecca Vitzman was somebody who, at the time, was having friendly relations with Dave in the Seattle, Washington area around 2019. At a party in 2019, Rebecca Vitzman or Dave puts his hand on Rebecca Vitzman's back, like kind of what you would do with platonic friends at a party or gathering. Like, hey, man, how's it going? Kind of like that. Rebecca literally claimed that touch on the back, that plutonic, non-sexual touch on the back, was led to an orgasm, an involuntary orgasm, that she literally took to court against him, which I found to be absolutely ridiculous. But the issue is that when in this kind of age of cancel culture, regardless if you're on the left or on the right, usually if you get these kinds of false accusations towards you, it's very hard, even with the evidence, even if you have receipts, audio recordings, all this kind of stuff, to be seen as normalized. So there are people in the atheist community who still have this view of David Silverman because they haven't seen him kind of as an atheist leader for so long, and this narrative of, oh, well, it's three people, it's three people, it's three people, therefore he's guilty. This view has persisted in the atheist community, and I grotesquely want to fight. I'm grotesque by it, and I want to fight back against it as much as possible, because Dave actually is an innocent man here.
So it, perhaps he is innocent. I don't know all the details of the cases. It, based on what I've seen and heard, that seems extremely unlikely. For example, he apologized. And why would you do that if you were innocent? But that's neither here nor there.
I can answer that if
Knowing
you want.
knowing that this person is so very controversial, maybe you want to stand by your friend, but why would you put a controversial person front and center in your organization when you're trying to avoid being divisive? It's almost like he's a big red flag waving. We're anti-cancel culture here, you know?
Yes and no. So I think it's important that we simultaneously stand by the truth. It's simultaneously important that we stand by people who have built the movement, who have unified the movement, and deserve to have their lives back if it's been wrongly taken away from them. And so we could say certain things that could make things a little easier. We could do certain things that could make things a little nicer. We overall stand by that main claim of trying our best to unify people as much as humanly possible. But simultaneously, I think there still is value to making sure that people's lives are not ruined if they don't need to be ruined. Dave is an innocent man. Why should he be ruined? He has experience. He led American Atheists and pulled it out of the ground, out of a bad financial state when he took over in 2010. He created a movement unifying event. And because of the very people that actually split the movement due to those side issues, saying that Dave was this, so we now have to keep him in the dark because of that. I don't think that is something that helps at all. And simultaneously, I tell people on the so-called anti-woke side of atheism too that when people from the woke side actually want to engage in dialogue and conversation, when they actually want are totally fine with associating with people on the so-called other side to fight for atheist issues, that they need to be open and receptive as well. So it's kind of a double-edged sword here. Sometimes when it comes to bringing on people who might have falsely accused others, but then they realized they were wrong or realized that they were fighting for an ideology rather than unity, we should kind of do our best to have our humanism in that fight. But it's since we are humans and we're having a lot of these dialogues online, it's not always perfect. But I think bringing Dave on board was definitely a net positive for the organization and for us standing by our values and trying to show like, hey, we are trying to have people from different perspectives in the community, all innocent people that are involved with us. um, let's do our best to move forward despite the fact that some people might not fully like every tiny decision we make.
Well, I don't think it's really fair to characterize it as a tiny decision. Congressmen in the past, when we cared about respectability and felt a sense of shame for wrongdoing, congressmen who even had minor scandals, a mistress or an affair. Hell, New York State lost a governor, Elliot Spitzer, over an
Mhm.
affair with a prostitute debacle kind of thing. People
Yeah.
would step back out of the limelight because even if they were innocent, their image is unhelpful for whatever cause they actually care about. So it seems to me that
Mhm.
if the goal is to promote atheism, that even if you are completely convinced that Dave Silverman is innocent, it's
Mhm.
still unwise to put him into the forefront like that, you know?
I think it was still absolutely worth it. It's because of another conclusion that we've kind of made. There are certain people, I would say on the other side of this debate, who do not want to associate with us in any way, shape, or form. That no matter how diplomatic we try to be, how explanatory we try to be, like you're allowing me to be, um, uh, that they do not see the value in us being involved in atheist activism in any way whatsoever. And you have plenty of these people that would rather prioritize other movements than atheism if it means their ideology survives. So if that is the case, which most definitely is, unfortunately, then we should still do our best to try to abide by the big tent mentality, even if it means we get some backlash. Um,
Well, that's
and not
sort
to mention,
of the issue. Like, if you want to build a big tent, here you've got this guy who, again, innocent or not, he's a big signal to a lot of people that victims of legitimate assaults their voices aren't heard here, or people who care for them, their voices aren't heard here. Because here's a guy with, a big shiny monument. It doesn't compute to me as far as a big tent type situation, because
Uh,
it's literally pushing people away.
well, I think it depends as well on who is who. I wouldn't even try to narrow it down or generalize it as victims of assault are repulsed, victims of harassment are repulsed. The only people that I've seen are that are genuinely repulsed by Dave's association with us are people who would not want, or the same people who basically had that automatic defensivism, the exact same activists who had this issue of not enough equity, not enough DEI in atheist circles. When it comes to people that happen to have political disagreements with Dave, when it comes to people who happen to have slightly different views when it comes to humanism, atheist activism, whether to be a firebrand or a diplomat, with enough explanation, we have been able to actually get rid of those barriers that originally were dividing people. So it's something that we felt was worthy to do. And then not only that, so Dave is on our advisory board, right? He is the chair of our advisory board. He led a once successful atheist organization who did a lot of great things in the 2000s and 2010s. He's been absolutely monumental in advising myself and advising other staffers as to how to lead a good atheist organization. So we have an innocent man. He's he's repulsing seen as repulsing to people who don't want to associate with us anyways, no matter how diplomatic we try to be. I still view it as a net positive for him to be a part of the organization, even if it might not be 100% perfect. There's more positives than negatives to it.
I mean, it's your decision to make, but I can't see it being a net positive. But there's a lot of other things to talk about. Um, so another appearance that you've done. Here's an interview with Civil Offense. In this interview, you said you don't want any group to use any kind of dogma to try to control your life. Fair enough. But in the same interview, you spoke of the God of a million genders, that feminism is bad, and that outside of right wing politics, woke is just the norm, among many other things. Doesn't it seem to you that these are themselves dogmatic beliefs?
I would say no. I because I've seen them directly impact and kill the unity in the atheist community. I think I've been able to understand. I've been able to kind of see how entire relationships, entire business relationships, and personal relationships have been shattered by differences on some of these issues. Issues that you have plenty of people left and right that are still trying to figure out the answers to. Um, and then not only that, I think when it comes to civil offense, so I go on a lot of these atheist type podcasts, right, where we go into a lot of stuff about creationism, we go into a lot of stuff about atheism, we go into a lot of stuff that the atheist community is already well tuned to. But as I am trying to normalize atheism, and as we are trying to normalize atheism in a lot of these other communities, this was me going on a libertarian podcast explaining to this gentleman about how this issue of a million genders, or the two genders, or there are a million genders. Well, you don't believe this, you're done, has killed what was the unity and breadth of the new atheist movement. I was trying to explain that to somebody of a perspective that already sees this as a divisive issue from his political perspective. So you'll find if you search up Thomas Sheedy or if you search up Atheists for Liberty on YouTube, you'll find me on a mix of these two different shows. And so it's based on the different types of activism that we do at AFL. Doing standard atheist activism and then also going into the communities that other atheist groups won't do in order to bring an atheist face into the limelight.
Hmm. I have many thoughts. I can see the point that issues like these can destroy friendships and so forth. But has it ever occurred to you that by taking a stand in this way, you are having a position on these issues. I mean, like, for example, when you summarily dismiss social justice and gender science as ideological, you're ignoring the overwhelming scientific consensus that supports them in exactly the same way a Christian fundamentalist dogmatically demands evolution can't be true. When you talk about woke as just normal behavior for everyone except the far right fringe, aren't you showing your hand about your own dogma?
I don't think so because I don't think it's dogma. So that then we can go into that discussion as well. So I very much don't like this idea that when Richard Dawkins or Colin Wright talks about gender, that automatically you have Ken Ham and these fundamentalists supporting them on a few of these issues. Well, therefore, it means that we are promoting dogma because Ken Ham, a dogmatic person who denies evolution, happens to be on our side of something. I think we can all agree the sky is blue, and if Ken Ham agrees with us, that doesn't automatically equate to us espousing the same dogma as Ken Ham does. But this then gets into the same problem. Thomas Sheedy has this view on this side issue. Therefore, Thomas Sheedy is grotesque. I'm already seeing the chat. Shady, Sheedy, Shady, Sheedy, Shady, Sheedy, bad, bad, bad. Atheists for liberty, therefore bad. All this kind of stuff. This only contributes to the issue. Now, to be fair as well, that doesn't mean that one has to love my view on this side issue. Um, One doesn't have to like Richard Dawkins's view on this certain issue, but Richard Dawkins simultaneously, I think we can agree, has done a lot of great work to normalize atheism throughout the world, being one of the leading atheists in the world alongside Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens and others. I tell people on the right of the political spectrum who really don't like Sam Harris because, oh well, he's got TDS, he's got this, he's got that. Okay, but how about this right-leaning atheist? Sam Harris has done a lot of great work in normalizing atheism, in pushing for freedoms of speech and expression, and a bunch of these other issues. You don't have to like Sam Harris. You don't have to agree with him on a bunch of stuff, just like the Bob reference I gave. But he has still made enormous contributions to the world of atheism, and not wanting to have people associate with his professionalism in being in an agree to disagree environment in an atheist conference. That only leads to us not making any progress whatsoever.
It's possible that it might interfere with progress, but the problem I'm having here is that, having personal opinions is fine, having disagreements is fine, but actively bringing them up, it seems to be creating these wedge issues when it just doesn't need to be talked about in the first place. I mean, there's a lot of issues in that particular interview. Like, for example, at roughly 58 minutes 30 seconds, you say, "I think there are some rightful concerns about how men are mistreated in the Western world these days." In, I mean, you say you're against social justice concepts, but then this sounds like a social justice concept, but also the manosphere kind of thing. Like, in
Well,
what
I think
way
this
do
then
you
goes
think
into
men are being mistreated?
Pluckrose. I think this also goes into what Helen Pluckrose was also talking about. There are some things that are labeled as social justice that I personally think are a good thing. I like fighting for second. I like second wave feminism, for instance. I like this idea of women and men being given the same equality of opportunity. I wouldn't want anybody to be denied a job just because of their sex, their gender, their race, their religious background. Um, so I find that to be overall a net positive. So I criticize the overarching issues that have engulfed that movement of feminism. In fact, some of those very issues that plagued that unity of the atheist movement. But then simultaneously, the same can be made when it comes to the issue when it comes to men. I want men and women to be treated, given the same opportunities in society, and to not have society ambush them. But simultaneously, you look at that red pill movement, you look at that manosphere movement. It's filled with Islamists. It's filled with people that don't even, some people who don't even want to have healthy relations between men and women. Um, there are issues of that end as well. But simultaneously, just saying, I want men have been treated poorly in certain aspects, um, and that me just bringing that up on a podcast as my personal view, that's it doesn't equate to me then like being against women's rights, for instance, or um me doing anything that would overall harm any fight for equality of opportunity. Nor does it mean that I endorse any toxic behavior towards women or toxic behavior towards men. It's like a
Eh,
generic statement.
eh, there's a lot to unpack there, but I guess to get to the root of things, like even in that response, you dropped a couple of right wing dog whistles, like you said, trans ideology, for example. That's a term, and maybe you're not aware of how it's used, but it's a term that's used in place of trans people. It's a dehumanizing mechanism. We're not talking about the trans people. We're just talking about the ideology. It goes back to the every other civil rights movement there's ever been. We're not talking about anti-Semitism. We're just talking about the Jewish question. You know?
I think you bring up a very good point. I actually think you bring up a very good point here, but I think the way I would draw back to it's very similar when it comes to Islam, right? I think you can have a criticism of Islam without being discriminatory against westernized, Americanized Muslims living in the United States who just want to live a peaceful life, right? Where they're reformed, they're not trying to inflict theocracy onto people or say death to America or any things like that. The same can be said about gender and gender related issues in the gender debate. The same can be said about Orthodox Judaism and theocracy. By the way, I'm not just I wholeheartedly like am against anti-Semitism in every respect. But the same can be said about the religion of Judaism, the religion of Christianity, right? I very much don't want to discriminate against Christians. I think people should have freedom of religion in this country, but simultaneously, I have a deep issue with the religion of Christianity. And so I think when it comes to gender, when it comes to a wide variety of cultural and political topics, that exact same argument can be made, just like we try to show that distinction with religion. So but here's where I also agree. I definitely also think that there are people that are discriminatory, are bigoted, who do want to institute dictatorship in the country and throughout the world, who will jump on board a movement or a discussion where people say, "Oh, I just want to have the conversation. I just want to talk about ideas," where they do want to inflict problems onto people. I do want to say that as well. But I think
I
people that
very much
do
agree.
just want to have a said discussion, they should not simultaneously be lumped in with those people either.
Well, I think you kind of dodged the main question there. Like, you mentioned how Christianity has problems, but actual Christians are people first, and they happen to be subscribers to Christianity, much like any other religion or political movements. Like, I see the chat too, and I don't hate the right wing and individual people in it. It's some of the ideas that are a little bit problematic, like Michael Knowles' speech about how transgenderism must be eradicated. Clearly, that's going to raise some red flags for someone like me and many of the other trans people in the chat here.
Or him
Um,
saying we need to go to 12. We need to go back to the year 1290. That's apparently he thinks that was the perfect year for civilization, without any idea of human rights, women's rights, LGBT rights, separation between church and state, anything like that.
yeah, regressivism is a really big problem. I honestly don't know why so many people want to go back to the 1950s, for example. I don't know why that's centered on as like the peak of American wonderfulness, because that was pre-civil rights amendment. That was just the beginning of second wave feminism. Women weren't automatically allowed to work. They couldn't even have a credit card. And heaven forbid you happen to be a minority person in that era. It's it's weird that people think that was a good time. But I really wanted to focus on what you mean by transgenderism or gender ideology, and maybe this will clear things up a little bit more. You reposted this thing from Reality's Last Stand, which is a reference to P.Z. Myers, who, full disclosure, is a friend of the community here because he's a science-oriented person. And it says, as gender ideology gained a foothold within the atheist movement, the brains of many prominent once and rational figures began to melt. Now, there's two huge problems here, aside from the blatant transphobia. This idea that if you agree with one social justice issue, your brain is melted. And the second is that insulting the man instead of addressing his argument. Do you think that makes your position look stronger or weaker, you know?
I think you could definitely make the argument that it could make our position look weaker to certain audiences. That is most definitely true, right? If you use certain language while not caring if a certain audience reacts a certain way, that could definitely be the case. But for Colin Wright has, I don't think he is a science communicator. He's an evolutionary biologist, but I also think that he is also so sick of certain things on the other side that I think he is the framing of the tweet is like, I'm upset. I'm upset about PZ. And also with PZ, for people who don't know, PZ was one of the people who fully stood on board with Atheism Plus and the division of the movement, not wanting the movement to associate with Dawkins, not wanting the movement, by the way, to associate with me. The moment Atheists for Liberty premiered as an organization, without even knowing about me being on these shows or podcasts or anything like that, pre all of that, I think I was on maybe 3 or 4 shows when I ran local atheist groups. And even then, I was closeted about some of my views when it comes to the social justice issues. PZ automatically did not want anybody to associate with Atheists for Liberty in any forms. He is I would say, the godfather or grandfather or one of the prime people that ended up actually killing the unity of the movement because, we have to focus on the social justice stuff and we have to make it the primary objective of the movement. And if you're not in agreement with it, you're a bigot. I can understand, though, from the perspective of those who share PZ's view on the gender debate, why people would be upset at Colin Wright. But I
Yeah, like
simultaneously don't
do you
disagree with what
see?
Colin Wright said here, though. If we look at the quote, as gender ideology gained a foothold within the atheist movement, the brains of many prominent and once rational figures began to melt because of the canceling, because of saying if you are not on board with this view of gender ideology, you must be ejected from the atheist community. Right. Even though both you and I have concurred, it is fine to have those disagreements. It is fine to have those healthy dialogues, but simultaneously, it's important to have a unified, good community that focuses on atheist issues.
Well,
Right.
there's a
And
distinction to be made here. Like I understand a lot of people don't really grasp uh, transgender people, trans issues, what any of it really means. A lot of people just have a visceral reaction of it's something unknown, or perhaps they think it's icky, whatever. I'm fine with educating people who legitimately don't know. It's when people take an active stand against us. That's a whole other issue. And this seems to be where Colin Wright is going. And you seem to be supporting it. Like, it's related to the Peter Boghossian thing earlier, that video from earlier, where it says pro-trans in the title. But everywhere I look, it seems like you're radically anti-trans. Like this P.Z. Myers situation, the God of a Thousand Genders comment. Which of these positions is the lie?
so, mind if I ask a follow-up question as well to that, to hopefully bring some perspective into this? So, it reminds me of the Bob reference, the made-up guy named Bob reference at an atheist conference that I was saying. So, I'll paint a scenario. We're all together at the Atheists for Liberty. You could pick a different organization. You know what? Let's even take Atheists for Liberty out of the equation. Let's say it's the year 2014. We're at the American Atheist National Convention, or we're at Skepticon, or we are at the Humanist Conference of the Year, whatever you want to call it. We are all at this event pushing for atheist normalcy, separation between church and state, criticizing creationism, criticizing Islamism, criticizing Orthodox Judaism, organized Hinduism, etc. We are unifying on how to get local chapters involved, how to push for science advocacy against religious dogma, and all that stuff. But Bob, on the other side has Colin Wright, or instead of Bob, it's Colin Wright, or Thomas Sheedy, or Richard Dawkins. They have a view on a certain issue that one could see that could be seen as even divisive or problematic. Not to an extreme where people's personal safety or anything of that isn't concerned, but when it comes to their view on a particular subject like this. But you simultaneously have either 45, 50, or 55% of the audience being in favor of that position, the other half being against that position. But we're all together in support of secularism and church-state separation and normalizing atheism. That 50% that doesn't like Bob or Colin Wright or whoever's sitting at that table, or me, they don't have to like that person's position on that issue. In fact, several days later, they're going to go to the gender ideology conference where there's going to be a protest outside, and all these people are going to go at it because they don't like each other's perspective on that issue. One side views it as bigoted and divisive. The other side views it as good or moral or whatever. That's what I'm trying to talk about here when it comes to what happened to the atheist movement and what Colin was saying here. I think that it's very clear that there are going to be some people, and we have this issue in Atheists for Liberty as well. We have some members that are on one side of certain issues here that really vehemently disagree with other people's side on some of these issues as well. But when we get together at an Atheists for Liberty gathering or meet up with the state directors, we're going to focus on the prime issues that brought us together. But half of the AFL audience could vehemently be opposed to one another at the other movement that they happen to be a part of. That was the issue, and this is exactly, I think, what Colin Wright was talking about here. And I'm actually, by the way, feel free to also repeat the questions because I do want to also address them as well if I didn't do so as well with my example. I don't want to cop out of that.
All right. Let's see. Where was I here? Yeah, it was. Well, it goes back to the root question of saying that all of these issues are what divided the earlier incarnation of the atheist community.
Yes.
Fine. But then you're the one who keeps bringing these things up. What's up with that?
I think there's a good point to be made here. And I think you kind of have a gotcha on this one when it comes to me. I do think that when it comes to, if we were trying to have a totally politically neutral side of the atheist movement where only the topics of atheism and secularism are discussed, and on the most part, we try to do that at Atheists for Liberty, at least in comparison to the other more legacy organizations. I think out of all of us, we at AFL happen to do it best. But you could make the argument that there's some content that's on the AFL channel that kind of steeps a little bit into outside territory. There's maybe some content that's said on a post or something that seeps into outside territory. That is fair. So I can actually agree with you on that. There is some stuff that I think, especially in our earlier years, so like 2020, 2021, that definitely is different than a lot, even some of the stuff we're pushing now. But then, would we then be able to then say the same about the other side too? If we are, is it good for then us to come to a consensus that we should have an atheist community where we're going to have people on the social justice side of things, we're going to have people on the anti-social justice side of things, but when they go to an atheist conference, they're going to unite together and talk about atheist issues, the liberty for us to be atheists in the Western world, the freedoms that we should push for in order to normalize atheism and preserve free thinking. Can we agree then that should be the focus of an American Atheist National Convention, an American Humanist Association convention. The reason why we go into wokeism again is because we see it as a defense of religion. It's defended religion and the dissolution of the movement. And you could argue that we could maybe have done a few better things here and there to show our neutrality better. But then the other side should do the same thing if we are being criticized for that as well, and if that other side wants to push for said neutrality too. Could we
I
agree
think
to that?
that's sort of the thing is a lot of the other atheist movements, the community over on the Line YouTube channel, for example, they are open about the fact they're secular humanists. They believe in social justice issues because too many. It goes back to what is the point of the atheism? What are the underlying values that atheism helps us realize? And if it's not supporting equality for people, if it's not supporting freedom of life, or getting government the hell out of your health care, then what is the point? And I think there's another rather bigger problem with all of this. It's you mentioned that the main point is to try to push back. You characterized woke as being antithetical to atheism, that it's pro-religion in some form or fashion that I don't understand at all. But then we've got your own support tends towards candidates who are very antithetical to atheism. Like, you say you're for free speech and free thinking, but you support candidates with book bans and censored speech in their platforms. You say you're for freedom for all, but you embrace reactionary politicians who actively work to remove freedom, some of whom are openly talking about repealing the 19th Amendment. And it should go without saying, all of these guys aren't just Christian, they're anti-secular. So from an outsider's perspective, it looks like you're willing to sell out every single value you claim to stand for. And perhaps the best example is this. You shared a post concerned with how the America First crowd want to execute atheists like you, to say nothing of what they have in mind for LGBT people, people of color, and other marginalized groups. And then you shared a post overtly pandering to those same America First Fourth Reichers. How is any of this intellectually consistent?
I think this is where I can really dive deep here and show that there's a lot of things that are not the same. So let's go into this first. I am a registered Republican. That has nothing to do with Atheists for Liberty. That has nothing to do with my atheist activism. I have stances on other issues politically that have nothing to do with my work as the president of Atheists for Liberty. I like the idea of low taxes. I like the idea of a strong military. I like capitalism as an economic system. I think that certain presidential policies are better than other presidential policies. Okay, so this is why when you were talking about my X feed, views are my own. I put it in there for an exact reason. So let's go over these two tweets, and I want to actually talk to your audience here as well, because there is a difference between these two people here. So very similarly to the word woke, right? How the word woke is used by some people like the Helen Pluckroses of the world to mean one thing and used by others to mean other things. We have people within Atheists for Liberty's membership, when it comes to their personal politics, who say that when it comes to their view on American foreign policy, they are America first, meaning that they do not want America to be involved in foreign affairs. And so if you're an American voter and you're voting, for instance, on foreign policy, a lot of the times you're going to have some people that are siding with Trump's view on foreign policy rather than Biden's view on foreign policy. Does that have anything to do with their atheism? No, that has to do with their personal views on who to like on a foreign policy issues. Nick Fuentes is somebody who does want to repeal the 19th Amendment. Nick Fuentes is a theocratic, monarchistic individual who doesn't like me at all and doesn't like Atheists for Liberty by one bit, who is saying he's America first in order to fool a baby boomer Trump old religious right voters into supporting his Catholic nationalistic view. And so I happen to be a part of the committee of the party in my local area, and I retweeted that tweet from March 13th. Austin Peterson also is an atheist who's in favor of separation between church and state, and that tweet was him going against Nick. Do you also have I believe this is a screenshot. Could you go back as well to the previous screenshot as well, the tweets before these two as well? I can get into detail with them too if you'd like me to as well.
Yeah, the assorted candidates.
So the assorted candidates. Okay, so we got. I actually don't recognize. I forgot who the guy is standing up next to Governor Abbott. I don't know him. If anybody knows who he is, feel
believe
free to say.
that's Mike Sepricone.
Mike Zapracone, yes.
Yeah, Senate candidate from New York, I think.
Yeah, standard like baby boomer, generic Republican candidate for U.S. Senate in New York. You know, not like just a standard person on the right in politics. Like in many local places, you'd have a standard, similarly aged Democrat standing next to a governor. He's not really somebody that's like I could even see his problem. It's me supporting out as me and as someone in outside politics, not in relation to atheism, my own thing. This is where like if Nick Fish of American Atheist happens on his own personal X feed to be retweeting Democrats, right? You know, that's not really much of an issue because that's his personal politics. It's the same with mine, just happens to be on the other side. And we have plenty of Democrats and plenty of liberals, by the way, that are members of Atheists for Liberty. Or I would say around half of our advisory board are people who would say they're on the left of the political spectrum, not the right of the political spectrum. When it comes to Ron DeSantis, you know, when it comes to squatting, right, the issue of squatting, that has nothing to do with religion. That has nothing to do with church-state separation. That has nothing to do with any of the issues that we in the atheist community focus on whatsoever. I'm against squatting. I'm against it in New York State for certain outside political reasons that I have. And that's Brad Palumbo, an LGBT, by the way, libertarian activist, happening to retweet Ron DeSantis's view on going against squatting in Florida. That has nothing to do with my work in Atheists for Liberty at all, and that's my personal politics. And then lastly, the tweet when it comes to Jesse Garcia, who's my county GOP leader, making a statement for Trump. This is just me performing my committeeman duties, again, outside of Atheists for Liberty, happening to retweet him. So if Nick Fish or Roy Speckart or Maggie from the Secular Coalition for America, they happen on their personal X accounts to retweet some of the same stuff, a governor in a wheelchair who happens to be a Democrat standing with a U.S. Senate nominee on the Democratic Party side, a Democratic governor going against a certain policy, making a video about it, or Joe Biden being up on stage saluting, and like let's pretend Nick Fish was on a political committee retweeting that. Again, nothing to do with atheism whatsoever. And this is actually a good thing that I was discussing when I was on the Kentucky Atheist stream as well. We cared more again about if you were in our political camp than if you were trying to actually normalize atheism in the country. The one thing I am loving to see, and I could, if I was a Democrat, I would say this is now and see that as a good thing because I am a proud atheist and secular activist. There is finally a Republican named Joffrey Schroeder, who's a state senator in Idaho, who finally came out as an atheist around 2 years ago, and I'm very, very glad that he did so. I want to see the Congressional Free Thought Caucus filled with not only Democrats, but Republicans as well. If the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, if this was an alternate universe and the Congressional Free Thought Caucus was filled with all MAGA Republicans, I would say, what the heck? You're alienating as well all these Democrats that could also join in who are in favor of church-state separation, make the caucus bipartisan. That's actually one of the things I've been talking about a lot recently on a bunch of different podcasts. So when it comes to, I want to make myself very clear, ideology aside, this is more party affiliated. That has nothing to do with Atheists for Liberty. That has nothing to do with my stances as an atheist activist. It has to do with my outside stances as Thomas Sheedy on a bunch of other issues. And just like how Nick Fish and Maggie and Roy Speckart have the right to have their own outside political views, I have the right to have my outside political views. The issue is if we have a litmus test in the atheist movement saying, well, if you're not a Republican, you can't be a good atheist activist. If you're not a Democrat, you can't be a good atheist activist. And I think this only sums up more and more now one of the prime issues that ended up killing our movement, not only the division between social justice, but the division between parties as well. And it's an issue because when we set up the Secular Coalition for America 22 years ago, we had this view that we are going to be nonpartisan. We are going to do what we can to approach every member of Congress, every members of state legislatures, counties, etc., to push for atheist normalcy. It is very true that the Democratic Party was far more advanced at the time of the 2000s than the Republican Party of embracing atheist advocacy. But what's happening right now in the GOP with Joffrey Schroeder coming out as an atheist, this is literally just a repeat of what we had to experience with the Democrats in 2002. Like, you barely get a single Democrat to support us. Going on a long rant now, but this has definitely gotten me fired up. I am all in favor of any atheist activist to have their own, be a part of any political party, and to have to do their committee duties as a part of that political party, and they have the right to support outside issues. I am right wing when it comes to being anti-squatting. I am right wing when it comes to supporting certain policies that maybe some people in the audience will not agree with me on. But that has nothing to do with my overall work at the end of the day as the president of Atheists for Liberty.
I can appreciate that a person's personal politics don't necessarily have any carryover with their professional duties. But as we reviewed earlier, looking at the official Atheist for Liberty channel, a lot of those politics are spilling over into the atheist activism. And that's a problem for a lot of reasons, not the least of which because like these particular elected representatives, DeSantis with his book ban and Don't Say Gay bill, and he's very much not pro-atheist. Like, sure, maybe you agree with him on
that's one thing I
squatting,
don't agree with DeSantis on, because it's censorship, and I'm not a fan of actually what DeSantis does in that category. That's one of the I disagree with Trump on a few things. I disagree with DeSantis on a few things. That book banning actually is one of the issues I actually do disagree with him on.
Well, that's good to hear, but I have to wonder if, all these, at least the right wing as it stands now, the politicians who are available to vote on, if you're still supporting them despite the tremendously overwhelming amount of reprehensible policies that they stand for and plan to enact, Project 2025 not being the least of those, where do you draw the line where you say, this is where I cannot ethically support these guys?
I think then you have to ask yourself if you're a single issue voter or not. I used to be. In 2015, 16, 17, 18, well, really 16, 17, 18, I was a single issue voter. But I then started to also care about other political issues. Again, my primary profession is still atheism and church-state separation, but I'm going to vote for candidates that I think check off multiple boxes, not just one or two boxes, right? And so on a bunch of outside issues that have nothing to do with atheism or secularism, my camp happens to be more rightward, while other people's camps happen to be more leftward. But then the same thing can be said if we were on a stream in the year 2002. Could the same then be said? Why are you supporting a bunch of Democrats that think that we are a Judeo-Christian nation and that atheists should not be in office? The amount of things that you had Democrats as well, and Republicans. There are some Republicans that continue to say some nasty things about atheists, but Democrats were saying the exact same things in 2002, 2004, and 2006. Then the same question could be made to all these atheist activists that were supporting voting for Democrats that were anti-atheist, anti-secularism, and anti all this stuff. Well, they happen to support those Democrats on a bunch of other issues. And there's another good thing of all this as well. With me being in my camp and with the people in the atheist movement 20 years ago being where they were, it also normalizes atheism. So when we go to the Conservative Political Action Conference every year, which is the right-wing big conference, right? Just like how the American Humanist Association goes to Netroots Nation, we're able to show these people that they're wrong about atheists, that atheists actually, that caring about the separation of church and state is actually a patriotic thing, and wanting your religion to be inflicted on everybody else is not a good thing. If you have these people on the right that claim that, the left is shoving this and that belief system down our throats, then why are you being a hypocrite and doing the same thing when it comes to religion? You guys are wrong on this. And we happen to love our country. We happen to be patriotic, but we don't think our rights come from God. We think our rights come from the Enlightenment. We think our rights come from the founding fathers. We view America as a secular nation, not a Judeo-Christian nation, not a religious nation, not a Christian nation, but a proudly secular one. And by us being those friendly faces on the right, just like you had other people being friendly faces on the left 20 years ago, it helps put a friendly face to atheism as well. So year by year, when we go to CPAC, we're going to Freedom Fest as well in the next few months, which is like CPAC, but it's more geared towards libertarians. We end up normalizing atheism in these spaces and making it where hopefully within the next several years, the next decade or two, you're not going to have religion be a defense for a left-wing position or a right-wing position in the American politic.
Well, as I've said, there are a lot of advantages to normalizing atheism, but if it comes at the cost of putting people in power who want to execute atheists, or even the people who don't want to execute atheists, but do want to start purging minorities, it
Who
doesn't
wants
do
to
us a
execute
lot of
atheists?
good.
But who
What's that?
wants to execute atheists? Who wants to execute atheists?
That was that
Like the
Nick
Groypers
Fuentes
do.
post.
Nick Fuentes is like definitely somebody who like we are vehemently against. We are against the Groyper movement. They hate us. So Islamists, who some of these woke people I've argued defend, they vehemently despise us. But we also go after those on the right as well. The Groypers and those people don't like us. But which person have like I retweeted, for instance, or supported has enacted policy says like we are going to totally get rid of the 19th Amendment, and we are going to execute atheists and do anything like that. Because I don't even care where my party affiliation would be by then. I would say I am absolutely not voting for any person who says or does that.
I should certainly hope so. And that kind of goes back to that question of where is the line? Like, that's an issue that you would absolutely not support. But where is the line? Like, is it okay to exterminate trans people as long as they're not going after atheists, for example?
No, no killing and no extermination. So we'll make that rule one. You can't advocate to kill a particular group of people based on their inherent characteristics.
Well, I'm glad to hear that at least. Um, my goodness,
So there we
there's
go. That's line sand drawing rule number one. We can make a few others too, but no, I have not seen anybody as well in the AFL network amongst the liberals and the conservatives and the libertarians and centrists and everybody who are members of Atheists for Liberty, for instance, left and right, who even on a personal level would endorse or support any politician that's advocating for killing people based on their inherent characteristics.
well, it's a baseline, I suppose. Well, we are almost out of time, so I've got one more thing, and I'm pretty sure I know how you're going to answer on this one, but it needs to be asked about.
Sure.
You're a member of Turning Point USA. That was one of the organizations I hand-wavingly referenced at the beginning in your bio. Turning Point USA is an expressly Christian nationalist organization, so level with me. Are you working for the Christian nationalists to subvert the atheist movement?
You're going to love my answer. You're going to absolutely love it. Okay, so when it comes to Turning Point USA, there was a lot of people on the woke side that believed that I worked for Turning Point USA, like I was a paid employee of Charlie Kirk's or things like that. So this is why I was saying that AAI bio in the beginning of the stream was very, very outdated because it is. I graduated college 3 years ago. I happened to be a part of a Turning Point USA chapter on a college campus. So like I was a member and I went to Turning Point USA meetings. That was my involvement with Turning Point. So when it comes to Turning Point, I think this needs to be said, and I actually think that your audience should know about this because this is a big, big issue, and this is where you're actually very much on the money when it comes to this. Turning Point USA in between, I would say, 2018 to maybe 2021 was going in a secular direction. When I was at the Turning Point USA Student Action Summit at the time, that was their national convention. I was there in 2019, and my friend Andy No was speaking. Someone who interned for the Center for Inquiry and was involved with atheist groups actually in Oregon before doing his political activism and journalism. He was a speaker at the Student Action Summit at Turning Point, and he forced Michael Knowles. Michael Knowles, who said a bunch of things in 2019 that he would not even say in 2024 because he's gotten so far more radical and theocratic. He got Michael Knowles to agree, you know what? If you're an atheist in the room and you don't believe in God, I am so happy to have you here. and this is around the same time where just a year later we actually ended up having a booth at an event. The people that were excluded at the time at said Turning Point USA events in 2019, in 2020, in 2021 were the Groypers. Nick Fuentes was not allowed at Turning Point events. This idea of us supporting the Constitution and not judging each other based on race or gender or anything like that was being promoted. I would argue classical liberalism and this kind of maybe stuff that was a little bit to the right of new atheism, but like near there, was starting to really become more potent there, and I liked it. And so, as the president of Atheists for Liberty a year later, I thought it would be a great idea for us to actually go into the Turning Point event and to find the atheists there. And we found a lot of atheists who were there, and there are still a good chunk of atheists who go to these events. But here's the problem, and this is why Christian nationalism is an issue. What Nick Fuentes and the Groypers decided to do is they said, well, I don't like that Turning Point is going in a secular direction. Let's infiltrate Turning Point USA. Let's have them become more religious. Charlie Kirk, a few years later, came out with this thing called TPUSA Faith. Mm-hmm. And when I was at CPAC in 2020, we shared a joint donor at the time, actually. He came up to me when I was just visiting the Turning Point booth because he knew who I was. And he said, I'll pray for you. Atheism leads to Marxism. You're not really an atheist. You're an agnostic. And I was thinking in my head, you are literally shooting yourself in the foot because a bunch of atheists who, by the way, that were a part of Turning Point USA, some of them who were even volunteers and staffers, they came up to the Atheists for Liberty booth soon after and said, I'm so sorry. What the heck did Charlie say about that? That is absolutely ridiculous. So that's my whole answer about Turning Point. That's why the AAI bio is old. I was a member of a Turning Point chapter that in 2019, in the spring of 2019, I polled the local members of my SUNY Albany chapter. It was 60% atheist and 40% Christian. I will sadly say that I bet those numbers have shrunken a little bit. You'll still see more atheists at CPAC and even at some of the Turning Point events, but the problem is that in certain spaces now, there is a Catholic fundamentalism that is growing and gaining more relevance. And this is exactly why I have been on this train, in the beginning of the show of like, we kind of need to unite. We have our problems. You don't have okay, guys in the audience, you don't have to like me. Half of you probably think of my policies as absolutely asinine and insane. I probably think of half of your policies as asinine and insane too. Okay. I'm not going to even sugarcoat it. But one thing I think that we can all agree is that our separation between church and state needs to be vehemently protected. We need to use a bunch of different tactics to try to normalize atheism and secularism more. We need to go into the left. We need to go into the right. We need to do what we can to make our mission successful by any means possible. We need to be reactionary. We need to be fiery. And we will have more uncomfortable conversations about these issues. And by the way, Ember, I would be more happy to come on board if you feel like this conversation has not been fully concluded. And I already know there's probably going to be a good chunk of this audience who really has a bad taste in their mouths when it comes to me. That's fine. That is just part of the course. That is a part of activism. But for anybody who's listening in, who at least understands and is in at least agree to disagree mode and understands the main picture as to what I'm talking about here, that's all I'm asking for. That's all I'm asking for. Because there is a new sexiness towards Christianity that is coming back. Islamism is only rising in the West by a rapid rate, which is scary for me. I'm a part of an organization called the Clarity Coalition where we monitor the spread of Islamism for the West world. That's very scary. So you're seeing the most extreme forms of religion only being known. Exactly. And this is why, very much, I will call out religion on the left as well. If there's any Islamism that is defended on the left, I will call it out. Any Groyperism, take the 19th Amendment away, criminalize homosexuality, let's execute any nonsense, insane quotes like that. That's got to be called out on the right as well. Any theocracy anywhere needs to be called out. And I am totally transparent and honest about that. And hopefully that's at least where we can end things on a somewhat decent note. Somewhat, because I know that this has not been perfect, but it doesn't need to be.
Yeah. I mean, obviously a lot of people aren't happy what they've heard here today. I can't say I'm satisfied myself, but I will give you credit for staying here and taking the heat, because some of these things got a little spicy, and honestly, not a lot of people would stick around for the whole thing. Before we go, I do have to, people send in super chats. It just seems respectful to present what they wanted to have
Sure.
presented. So $20 from Dr. Tapioca Weasel. Thank you very much. And he says, Tom, this appearance hasn't struck me as an appearance by an atheist organization, but by someone more concerned by just asking questions and focusing on exactly the topic you think unhelpful to the core issue of atheism.
I can't fully disagree with you there. I don't like, for example, when the IDW was very much alive, this idea of just asking questions led to this fantasy of Christianity and fantasy of theocracy in certain circles kind of popping back up because, well, it's better than woke. And for me, as someone who doesn't like wokeism, with at least the definition that I've given, I don't like to have to choose when it comes to that. I don't like this mentality of people being like, we're just asking questions, but then we're going to slowly normalize this idea that we all need Christ back in our lives. I hope you do not think that that is what I am trying to do here. And I also want to give you all my contact information. If any of you legitimately want to ask me something that you think I didn't go into the best of detail here, you can email me at thomas.sheedy@atheistsforliberty.org. Again, that's thomas.sheedy@atheistsforliberty.org. Um, I really do want to try to clear the air on some things. I also know that there will be some people where I totally will not be able to clear the air. There are some people I think who will totally write me off. But again, this is for whatever percentage of the audience here is watching that's like, you know what? I really don't like what Thomas said here, here, and here, but I at least kind of understand what Thomas is saying here. I really want to know what Thomas thinks on this issue. Let me ask him. I am totally open to that. So hopefully, again, that's not how I was trying to at least come off, but I understand the view. I have been trying to be diplomatic here in this on this stream. I'll admit that too, but that is also what being a president of an organization has to do, anyways.
It's true. I think that's why, a lot of your views kind of surprised me. Like, I don't want to digress into my whole own thing because there's super chats to go through. Robin Webster, huge supporter of the channel, sends $2, and thank you so much, and says, I prefer humanist believers over atheist bigots. It's a little spicy, it's a little offensive, but I mean that's kind of the picture we've got tonight, you know?
I've seen that quote a lot, especially with the keyboard Facebook people, especially in my history of the movement, even before AFL was created. I've seen people say that. Um, it's not a disagreeable quote. I would rather be allies with Christians who share, most of my humanistic views. If there are any atheists who, like, again, like, want to kill people based upon their inherent group identity, their group characteristics, or want to do something that is so grotesque, right? That line that we drew, and then maybe a little bit more than just that line. We can get into more discussions as to where that line is. It's like that quote is so generic. Anybody can agree with that quote. Right wing atheists can have that view. Left wing atheists can have that view. Then we have to go into detail of what we mean by that, and that's where it's all subjective, and that's where we divide.
It's true. I don't want to be any more rude than I already have been. I kind of want to say you were deflecting on that one, but I'm going to let you get out of that one because there's a bunch of others, and we need to end this show. Jenny Morgan sends $4.99. I appreciate that, and says, "Is your organization going to activate your efforts towards shutting down Moms for Liberty?"
I would say no, but also to be fair, we have just not made that on a positive or a negative a priority. We have not approached Moms for Liberty on doing any collaboration or support of them. I have seen some tweets about some people and officials at Moms for Liberty saying some ridiculous things. So no, no to endorsing, but also no to opposing. Feel free to let me know what Moms for Liberty has done in that category. We're not going to support any group that advocates for theocracy. We're not going to support any nonprofit, left wing or right wing, that goes in such a radical direction. This is what I was talking about like turning point changing. It's why like I've had staff meetings, for instance, on if we should even go to turning point conferences. Um, if we have more resources, I'd say sure to just pull the atheists at those events who like want to be recognized for who they are and not have Jesus shoved down their throats. Um, not to say that there's some things I like that they do, but maybe the same is the case for Moms for Liberty. So I just don't know too much yet. That's why I'm answering the way I am. So no, we're not making it a priority. But feel free to email me with information.
All right. BTF Wayne sends $5. Thank you so much. And says, Sheedy, what's the difference between being woke and give me liberty or give me death?
That's actually very interesting. So if we mean I guess they're very similar in a way. Because let's pretend woke. We all agree. Let's pretend that everybody agrees with my definition of woke or the new discourse's uh, definition of woke. Um, Both those phrases are meant to explain ideologies that went to extreme lengths to fight for what they believe in. You will have some people that claim to be on that extreme woke end that are willing to shut down certain things in order to get what they want. For instance, somebody speaking on the college campus, Jordan Peterson is speaking on a college campus. You will have some of these people that might be on the extreme end of what we call woke who will try to stop him from speaking, who will go to those physical lengths to do that. Give me liberty or give me death. Yeah, Boston Tea Party, a bunch of different instances in the early history of the 13 colonies where lengths were made to do that. Where we disagree is, well, one view is better than the other. We can agree that both the actions could be similar, but we could disagree on what side happens to be better, what cause happens to be justified.
Well, it seems to me that they're both fundamentally in service to freedom. Like
In some ways, like freedom
I
of speech for the people to oppose the speaker, that is certainly true. Uh, but I would say that I think it is of value to allow somebody to speak, but to simultaneously do what you can to still oppose their views. So if there's a Q&A, um, roast them in the Q&A, or go. If these are people that you are vehemently opposed to you in every single way, this is my view, and this is not just for right wing speakers or anti woke speakers. If this is Ibram X Kendi, I would literally make the same claim. I think it's just I don't share that view that somebody simply speaking on an opposing view has on an American campus, whether it be a left winger or a right winger, has to be met with the same amount of physical action that the American patriots of the 1770s and 1780s went
Yet there are differences. Like you don't necessarily have to be executed by the British for what you stand for. But I think standing is still every bit as important. Like Voltaire said, I disagree with what you say, but I defend to the death your right to say it. That's kind of what woke is all about, is everyone should have the right to speak, as opposed
Well,
to be silenced because they're a marginalized group.
I think if it's the Helen Pluckrose definition, I totally agree. Like I think Ibram X Kendi should not be shut down from having an event on a university campus, just like Jordan Peterson should not be. I very much would love to see some of Ibram X Kendi's views challenged, just like I would like to see some of Jordan Peterson's views on religion challenged. But they should have the right to speak, regardless.
All right, Dr. Tapioca. This one he's just saying, and thank you for the $5. He said stepped out for a moment, maybe you covered it, but there's super chats. Yeah, we're covering those. I really do try to make sure to get to these things. Also, memberships. Reggie, thank you so much. Dr. T, thank you so much. I saw earlier on Left-Handed Jedi, Von Rek, Reggie again, Dr. T. Yeah, I appreciate the hell out of all you folks and trying to support the channel, trying to keep things going, keep the conversation moving. It means a great deal to me, and I just want to make sure that you guys are aware that I see you and I appreciate it. Um, Von Rex sends $25. Thank you very much. And this one's a little extra spicy. He says, Tom, stop being a bigot and your life will be better.
I could be spicy and say no. If what you view of my activism as me being a bigot, I'm going to say no to that. But thank you for supporting a good YouTube channel. If your passion in opposing me has caused you to donate $25 to support a channel that I've already seen has come out with some good pro science, pro reason, anti theocracy videos, I take it. I'll be your boogeyman.
Very generous. And last one, and then we'll actually wrap. Hunter Biden's laptops, and it's $5, and that is a great name. Thank you so much. And he says it's all about the separation of church and state, but he supports the Christian nationalists. This dude lies.
I think it depends on what we mean by Christian nationalists. So I am opposed to people who genuinely want to make this country a Catholic monarchy, absolutist hellhole. I speak out against Nick Fuentes. I speak out even against some of my own colleagues. For anybody who wants to check out this X feed that some of the screenshots are from, you can see me. Like sometimes I even make more content that is anti-Christian theocracy and calling out some of the IDW people for being too soft on religion. Um, and I even get some people like, why aren't you coming out with as much anti-woke stuff or like anti-Islamism stuff? Why are you like you're really going at it with the Christian stuff here and there? And I will admit sometimes I need to actually do more anti-Islamism stuff now because I've been doing too much anti-IDW softness on religion stuff. I think it really it comes down to I I am supportive of people who happen to check 8 of 10 boxes when it comes to where I go in the voting booth. That does not mean that some of these people and what they say about religion needs to be improved. I think some of it is still stupid and silly and antiquated. And it's the exact same thing that we were talking about when it comes to the Democrats in 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005. Even stuff that Obama said, and I was an Obama Democrat in 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16. I just because you engage in politics and vote for somebody doesn't mean that they are perfect when it comes to the topics of religion and atheism. Unfortunately, the Democratic Party is actually still kind of that way too. You will have certain secular groups right now at the Democratic National Convention not being given enough legitimacy, even in 2024 with the Congressional Free Thought Caucus. So this idea that I'm the one that's supporting Christian nationalists, there are plenty of Democrats that are catering to Christianity right now in order to gain votes too. It's just you not liking where I stand politically, and you don't have to like where I stand politically, but that's where I stand politically, and that has nothing to do with my AFL presidency nor my atheist advocacy.
All
But thank you for
right.
the question.
Yeah. Like I said, it's some of these get a little spicy, and I've been kind of spicy myself, and it's politics, but it's also people's lives, and that's why people get so spicy. This shit matters. It's more than just tax cuts and what we
Especially
can get
amongst a lot of the
married and
social issues. I understand why some people are very, very passionate. So we're only becoming more divided on a lot of these cultural topics. So I'm no stranger to that. So I know it can get very divisive.
Yeah, for sure. Alrighty. Well, as I said earlier, I do appreciate you sticking around and taking the heat. I don't think we have a really conclusive answer on a lot of these issues, and that's very troubling in several ways. But on the flip side, you have made yourself available for people to contact you to get in touch, and yeah, hopefully we'll see progress in the future. Hopefully we'll see progress on the issues we all care about, like humanism and the advancement of atheism, and at least in that there's some common ground. And everybody in the live chat, I appreciate the hell out of you folks being here. And it, as I always say, that's the reason we do lives, is having you guys here means the world to me. And yeah, at the end of the day, you don't have to bind yourself into knots to justify things based on mythology, because you are better than religion. Good night.